Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. My name is Linda Zhang. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Interior Design, and I'm also the inaugural research in resident at the University Library. So my research explores how design technologies and materials can positively contribute to living memory, community heritage, as well as questions of identity and spatial practice. And I do this through a thinking through making protocol. And the point of this is really just to center embodied forms of making as a site of knowledge production. So for example, nobody's documenting Chinatown's architecture. So as in a very basic way, I'm just 3D scanning the two remaining downtown Toronto Chinatowns on an annual basis, because then at least we can have a record of its changing urban form. On the other side of things is sort of actually, what do you do with that now that you have it? Because it's not really accessible, right? The data, you need a certain software to open it. You need a certain amount of GPU to be able to just be able to visualize it with a certain graphics card. So I have this data now, great, but how is it useful to anyone? And especially how is it useful to the people whose lives are actually lived in these spaces? But the act of just documenting, I think, can still be largely powerful and important, because once you have the records, there is something to say that this mattered. There's a huge attention to text as a citational practice, in academia. If you can't document it in text and disseminate it as text, it's not research. If you don't have records of a space, how could you ever argue for anything to protect it? And so much research that usually happens in technology in academia is just about innovation, doing something for the sake of being able to do it. Whereas the questions that we have in our research are more around, okay, so how could these technologies actually be used to give agency to community, to be useful to community, to empower community? When I think about these questions, it's often through the lens of being a woman of color. I'm also then in sort of two disciplines. So I teach in interior design at the Creative School, but my background is in architecture. So I'm both a licensed architect as well as a certified interior designer. Part of envisioning the future of women in, I think, any field, for me, is always coming back to this question of women. We're not all one women. And I think women experience inequality in different ways. If we look at women of color, especially in PWI institutions in Canada, we're basically almost exactly the same as we were 15 years ago. There's been, and I think, enormous progress in terms of women in academia. But once you actually start disaggregating the data and looking at the multiple ways in which people are marginalized, there's very different needs also within this one community. Even within women, there's a lot of folks who are lesser heard. There are folks amongst women who are also silenced. And so as we kind of move forward in any profession, thinking about the role of women and solidarity with each other, I think there's a lot that we still need to do as women to kind of actually support each other and understand how we can also be more supportive of folks who are actually experiencing more challenges than we are. Even if we are ourselves still experiencing challenges, those aren't mutually exclusive things. I mean, in general, it's how do you be more of an empathetic human? Just be a good person. And if there's a space that you're in where you may be receiving a lot more either support or power, or people are more willing to listen to you, who is not receiving those things in the exact same room that you're in, it might just be you might just be on a panel with someone else, right? And there might be different dynamics based on their sexuality and still being a woman, that they're experiencing a very different space than you are, and you're both women in the same space. I'll see it all the time in our field when we have student presentations and reviews. And the reviewers love to just start talking and debating on their own about their own ideologies. And it's supposed to be about the student and the student getting feedback. And in that moment, if I'm a reviewer, I'm in a position where I can be okay, that's great. But actually, I want to pose a question to the student who's presenting, because I'd actually like to hear from them and not you. I can say that now, but the student doesn't have the ability to interrupt their reviewers and say, actually, I want to talk about my project. That would not go well based on the power dynamics that are at play. And so there are lots of different moments, I think, where we're in these situations, and all it takes is just a simple redirection of what the affective flows are in that space, and it can reset the space entirely, and it can be immensely supportive for somebody. There are really unexpected moments where your paths just might cross with other folks that you just didn't know that they would. For me, I can think of a mentor I now have, who actually is a woman of color and is a scholar, which I never had ever met before in my entire education, because those were like some magic unicorn that didn't exist back then. What's really amazing is that this sort of like mutual understanding of how things are and what the issues are. And what's been incredible is to sort of just like witness the ways in which she has not only supported me, but has also supported other, like not only other scholars, but the community in general through her work. And basically like without ever asking for anything back, just created opportunities for others. One of the favorite things that she's kind of said or imparted as wisdom for me is also that everyone needs a young person as a mentee or as a mentor. Like we always think about like, oh, mentors are the senior person, and then, you know, mentees are like the young people. But actually, like all of us who traditionally think of ourselves as mentors, we also need to like shut up, actually, because we don't always know what we're talking about. And there's a lot of things in the world that are changing in positive ways that the next generation really needs to teach us about. And so that's also, I think, part of, you know, being in community and kind of recognizing where you are, what you have, what you've maybe inherited, and kind of being open to also like how things are changing and also how you also yourself might need to continue to change.